The Mississippi River was a living thing in 1855, wild, moody, and unpredictable. Some nights it shimmered like a mirror beneath the moon. Other nights it boiled with rage, tearing trees from their roots and swallowing them whole. At a lonely stretch called Whispering Bend, fog rolled in like ghosts gathering to speak. It was here that people claimed a man waited, always alone, always near the ferry that creaked softly in the current. His name was Elias Crane, and his ferry had no posted fare. Elias was tall and weathered, his skin tanned from sun and river wind. His eyes held a calm sadness, like someone who had seen too much. Locals said he was strange. He spoke little, never drank, and didn't seem to age like other men. Yet, when someone was desperate enough to cross, he was always there, lantern in hand. And when they asked, "How much for the crossing?" Elias would answer in that slow, solemn drawl, "I take no coin, only what weighs heavier." No one ever quite understood what that meant, but everyone who took his ferry came back changed. To most, a ferryman without a price was a mystery. To others, a blessing or a curse. Travelers from nearby towns whispered their theories over whiskey and fear. Some said Elias was an angel. Others swore he was the devil himself, trading not in silver but in souls. But those who met him spoke differently. They said Elias looked straight through you, as if he saw something no one else could. He didn't ask for your name, your story, or your coin. Only one thing. What do you carry inside you that's too heavy to bear? Then, if you answered truthfully, he'd nod and take up his oar. He rowed silently, never once looking back. Some said he whispered prayers. Others said he listened. To the river, to the fog, to something only he could hear. And by the time the ferry touched the far shore, most passengers felt lighter, though none could explain why. One night, when the river fog was thick as milk, a young man stumbled down to the dock. His clothes were torn, his feet bleeding. He looked over his shoulder as if the world itself were chasing him. Elias lifted his lantern. "Evening, son." "You running from someone?" The young man hesitated. I'm Josiah. I ain't got nothing, sir. No coin, no horse, no name worth speaking." Elias studied him quietly, the light flickering across his tired face. "You got your soul, don't you?" Josiah blinked. "Ain't much left of it." "That's payment enough," Elias said softly. He motioned for Josiah to step aboard, and the ferry slid into the current. The fog swallowed them whole. Halfway across, Josiah began to cry. He confessed he was a runaway slave, escaping from a plantation upriver. "They'll kill me if I go back," Elias kept rowing. "Then you won't go back," he said simply. "But when you reach the other side, you start clean. No hatred in your heart, or you'll still be chained." When they reached the far shore, Josiah stepped off trembling, but free. He looked back to thank the ferryman, but Elias and the ferry had already vanished into the mist. By morning, the river town of Claiborne buzzed with talk. A fugitive had vanished across the Mississippi. Some said the ferryman helped him, others whispered darker things. "Elias Crane don't take money," one man spat at the tavern. "He takes what's inside you." "That's witchcraft," but the older folks shook their heads. "No," said old Martha, the innkeeper. "He's just a man who listens to pain." That night, a group of boys dared each other to walk down to the ferry dock. The river was still, the air heavy. They shouted, "Ferryman, take our souls." A soft wind blew, carrying the faint creak of rope and the splash of an unseen oar. The boys fled screaming, but one swore he saw a figure standing in the fog, holding a lantern, waiting. A month later, an old widow named Margaret Whitaker came to the riverbank. Her husband, a fisherman, had drowned weeks before. She carried a small locket in her hands, trembling. "I heard you can cross where others can't," she told Elias. "I just want to speak to him. One last time." Elias studied her face, a face carved by years of love and loss. "You can't bring back the dead, ma'am," he said softly. "I don't want him back," she whispered. "Just to tell him I forgive him." For leaving, Elias nodded and helped her aboard. They drifted into the fog, the lantern flickering against the dark water. When they reached midstream, he said, "Speak now, if you've something to say." Margaret clutched her locket and whispered, "I forgive you, Thomas." The river grew strangely quiet. Then, from the mist, came a faint sound, like a sigh carried by the wind. When they reached the far shore, Margaret's eyes glistened with peace. Elias bowed his head. "He heard you," he said simply. And for the first time in years she smiled. It wasn't long before the town preacher, Reverend Parker, took notice. From his pulpit he thundered, "The ferryman on Whispering Bend is no man of God. He deals in shadows, not scripture. The devil needs no coin when he can trade in your souls." Some nodded in fear. Others doubted. But curiosity has a way of ignoring warnings. That night, Parker himself rode down to the river, Bible in hand. Elias stood waiting, calm as ever. "I've come to see the devil with my own eyes," the preacher said. Elias smiled faintly. "Then you best look in a mirror first, Reverend." "The devil's fond of righteous men." The preacher's hand trembled. "You dare mock me?" "I mock no one," Elias said. "But I've carried enough guilt across this river to know. You can't preach away what's inside you." Parker turned away, shaken. He never mentioned the ferryman again. A restless teenage boy named Samuel Briggs came one evening, his eyes darting nervously. "Sir, I need to cross. My ma's sick in Vicksburg." Elias gestured him aboard. They rowed in silence until Elias stopped midstream. "Your mother's not sick," he said quietly. Samuel froze. What you mean?" Elias looked at him sharply. "Your tongue burns with lies, boy. The truth weighs less." "Speak it," Samuel broke down, sobbing. "I stole my pa's money. I'm running away. I didn't mean to. I just can't face him." Elias rested an oar across his knees. Better to face his anger than carry his forgiveness unearned. He turned the ferry around. When they reached the dock, Samuel ran home in tears. Years later, when his father died, Samuel told the story to his own son. "That ferryman saved me," he said. "He made me go back, and it changed everything." Dr. Abram Lowe was a man of science, a skeptic of superstition. He'd heard the tales of Elias Crane and decided to expose him as a fraud. When he reached the ferry, Elias merely nodded. "Crossing tonight, Doctor?" "I am," Abram said sharply, "and I'll prove there's nothing divine about you." Elias smiled faintly. "Then let's test your truth." They rode into the fog. Midway across, Abram began to tremble. From the swirling mist came faces, pale, sorrowful, familiar. He saw the patients he'd failed to save, the children he'd turned away because they couldn't pay. "Stop this trickery," he shouted. Elias said nothing. "It's not trickery, Doctor. It's memory." When they reached the far shore, Abram left his medical bag behind. "You win," he said hoarsely. "Some burdens can't be healed by science." Elias only nodded. "Now you understand what I ferry." One icy night, as snowflakes danced on the river, a little girl came to the dock holding a candle in both hands. Her cheeks were red with cold. "My mama says Papa's gone across the river," she said. "Can you bring him back?" Elias knelt to meet her eyes. "No one comes back from the other side, child. But you can send him a message." He placed her candle on the water and whispered, "Now, tell him what you wish." The girl closed her eyes and said, "Tell him I love him, and I'm not scared anymore." The flame floated into the fog, glowing softly until it disappeared. For a moment, the wind carried a faint whisper. "I love you, Rosie." The girl gasped and smiled. "He heard me." Elias watched the river in silence. A father always hears, if the love's real enough. Though war hadn't yet broken out, the land was restless. One misty night, a soldier in tattered gray stumbled onto the dock. His hands shook as he held out a bloody uniform coat. "I deserted," he confessed. "Couldn't take the killing." "I just want to forget," Elias nodded and took the oar. "You'll cross, but forgetting ain't part of the fare." They rowed quietly until the soldier whispered, "You think God forgives men like me?" Elias's voice was calm. "He forgives truth quicker than excuses." "So tell him the truth." The soldier hung his head. "I was scared." "Then he's already heard you," Elias said. When they reached the far bank, the man knelt and wept. By sunrise, he buried his uniform near the shore and walked away barefoot, a lighter man than before. From the opposite bank, Elias whispered into the wind, "Another soul made whole." One night, when the fog was so thick it felt like a wall, Elias saw a figure waiting on the riverbank, a tall man cloaked in black, with eyes like polished onyx. He did not speak at first, simply watched the ferryman row toward him. "You've ferried many, Elias Crane," the man said finally, his voice cold and quiet. "But your debt is unpaid." Elias paused mid-stroke. "Debt?" "Every soul you guide weighs upon you," the stranger replied. "One day, the river will claim what it is owed." Elias lowered his gaze. "I've paid in service. I've borne the grief of those I ferry. What more could the river ask?" The stranger's eyes glinted. "Time will tell." Then, as silently as he appeared, the figure melted into the fog, leaving Elias alone with the whispering river and a chill that ran deep into his bones. That night, sleep came fitfully. Elias's dreams were haunted by fire. He saw a church blazing under a stormy sky, screaming faces pressed against locked doors. Flames consumed everything, but he could not escape. It had happened long ago in Vicksburg. Elias had been a young preacher, full of zeal. One stormy night, lightning struck the church as he preached a sermon. In a moment of panic, he locked the doors, believing he could keep the congregation safe inside while he ran for help. But the roof collapsed. 23 souls perished, and only Elias survived. Since that day, he carried their guilt as a living weight. That river, that ferry, was his penance, and his path to redemption. Every soul he ferried was a chance to heal the grief he had caused, a chance to guide the lost toward peace. Years later, Josiah, the runaway boy from the first crossing, returned, now grown and free. "I came to thank you," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "You saved me from a life I didn't deserve." Elias's gaze was soft. "No, son, you saved yourself." Josiah shook his head. "I could never have done it without you." That night, I felt a hand guiding me, even through the fog. Elias studied the river and murmured, "Do you hear them? The voices in the mist?" Josiah listened carefully, then shook his head. "No, only the river." Elias nodded, relief washing over him. Some burdens, it seemed, could finally be left behind. A sudden storm swept through the Mississippi, turning the river into a furious beast. Rain pelted down like lead, waves battered the banks, and homes along the shore began to flood. Most ferries had long been destroyed or swept away. But Elias did not leave. Families trapped on rooftops, farmers clinging to debris, even a few frightened livestock, all waited for the ferry that should not have existed. Through the storm, Elias's lantern shimmered like a guiding star. He ferried them across one by one, whispering words of comfort. By dawn, Dozens owed their lives to the ferryman who never asked for silver, only courage and truth. Sheriff Dalton, a man of law and order, finally rode down to the dock. His horse snorted nervously. "You're done, old man," he barked. "People are saying you talk to ghosts. You're a danger to this town. Stop the ferry, or I'll see that you can't." Elias did not flinch. "Then I'll take you across next, Sheriff," he said quietly. Dalton raised his rifle, hand shaking slightly. "You dare mock me?" "No mockery," Elias replied. "Only truth. The river doesn't judge by law, only by what weighs in your heart." Something in Elias's eyes, a strange depth, like he had already glimpsed the other side, made the sheriff pause. He lowered the rifle uneasily and turned his horse. The river was silent once again, but the lesson lingered. No power on land could command the currents of the heart. On a moonless night, a mysterious woman arrived at the dock. Her face was veiled, her voice a soft whisper. "You ferried my husband once," she said. "Now, I wish to go where he went." Elias studied her carefully. "Are you certain?" "I am," she replied, dropping her wedding ring into his palm. "It's all I have." The ferry drifted into the mist. The woman's sobs softened as they moved farther from shore. Elias rowed silently, feeling the weight of her grief. When they reached the far bank, she was gone. Only her shawl remained on the seat, wet with river mist. Elias whispered softly, "Peace to you, Margaret." Some nights the river carries more than bodies. It carries the closure of hearts. One crisp morning, a boy named Thomas ran to the dock, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. "My mama said to give you this," he said shyly. On it was a drawing, Elias standing in a small boat, surrounded by angelic figures. The boy whispered, "She said you helped her when no one else would." Elias held the paper gently. He gazed across the river. "Then tell her, my work's almost done." Sometimes the simplest acts, like listening, ferrying, and caring, leave the deepest impression. One dawn, the river was eerily still. Elias rowed to the dock expecting no one, yet a familiar voice called, "Elias Crane, your passage is due." It was the stranger in black, the one from the night he had first confronted Elias. Elias smiled faintly. So be it. He stepped onto the ferry for the last time, oar in hand. For the first time, he did not carry anyone's burdens but his own. The rising sun kissed the mist, turning it gold. He rowed steadily, his heart lighter than it had ever been. By morning, the townsfolk found the ferry drifting near the bank, empty. Only one object remained, a single coin on the seat. It was unlike any coin they had seen, stamped with a cross on one side, a pair of wings on the other. The preacher muttered in awe, "It's his soul's payment." Others whispered that Elias had finally been ferried to his own peace. The river, it seemed, had claimed its debt and granted him salvation. Years passed. Eventually, the townsfolk built a bridge over Whispering Bend, yet the river never forgot. Travelers claimed that on foggy nights, a lone lantern glimmered beneath the bridge, drifting slowly across the water. Some said if you whispered your deepest sorrow into the wind, the ferryman still listened. And sometimes, if the river was calm and your heart sincere, it answered back. Elias Crane, the ferryman who took souls instead of coins, had kept his promise to carry the lost safely home, to teach that redemption and peace are worth far more than gold, and that even the heaviest burdens can find solace when met with kindness.